From the dawn of glorious civilizations, when prophecy still echoed in the ears of monarchs and shamans, they were the keepers of the cosmos' hidden knowledge. The connection between humanity and the plant world in those times was sacred and profound, transcending fleeting trends or escapism veiled as medicine. It was a mystical alchemy, a harmonious blend of body, soul, and nature. In that ancient context, cannabis was more than just a plant, it was a portal, an opening leading not only to radiant light, but also revealing the shadowy depths of the human psyche. The central question of this video, rarely considered with genuine depth, is this: what are the true spiritual consequences of using cannabis? We will not seek answers in governmental pronouncements, sterile scientific studies, or the superficial idolization of popular culture. Instead, our journey will delve into the heart of ancient traditions, decipher the subtle meanings within sacred texts, and listen to the voices of mystics who dared to venture beyond the veil of smoke. Prepare for a transcontinental and trans-epochal exploration, drawing insights from the Atharva Veda of ancient India to the Hermetic philosophy of Alexandria, touching upon the vibrant rituals of Rastafari and the visionary experiences of Ethiopian saints. Our aim is not to judge, but to unveil the hidden truths. Cannabis, this plant now often dismissed, criminalized, or excessively romanticized, once served as a sacred key in numerous ancient cultures. And keys, as we understand, are not meant for worship, but to unlock doors. The crucial question is, which doors are we opening? Ancient India, divine gift in the dance of destruction. Rebirth. In ancient India, the Atharva Veda revered cannabis as one of the 5 sacred plants of the earth, a divine gift bestowing Amrita, the nectar of immortality. Its profound association with Shiva, the deity of destruction and regeneration, is far from coincidental. Shiva, the master of the cosmic dance, is the one who shatters all illusions. His devotees, the ascetic sadhus, utilize cannabis in clay kilns during extended periods of meditation. However, this practice was always embedded within a solemn ritual, accompanied by fasting, chanting, and periods of seclusion. Their intention was not mere intoxication, but the transcendence of the ego, the liberation from identification with the finite physical form. Cannabis was not an escape from reality, but a direct confrontation with its true nature. The mystical East, ally of longevity and spiritual insight. In the enigmatic East, enlightened Taoist masters regarded cannabis as a valuable ally on the path to longevity and the awakening of spiritual vision. The esteemed alchemist Ge Hong, in his seminal work Bao Puzi, documented specific combinations of cannabis with ginseng and other potent herbs, believed to induce lucid dreaming and expand the boundaries of consciousness. Within Taoist philosophy, all existence is permeated by qi, vital life energy. When cannabis was used in harmony with the body's natural rhythms, it was thought to refine and unblock the flow of this energy. Conversely, in an unbalanced individual, it could amplify inner turmoil. Cannabis acts as a potent amplifier, and like any powerful instrument, it can be perilous if the instrument, the body and mind, is not properly attuned. The Arab world and Sufism, between divine ecstasy and wise restraint. In the medieval Arab Islamic world, certain mystical branches of Sufism also incorporated cannabis, particularly hashish, into their spiritual practices. For the Sufis, the ultimate aspiration was fana, the annihilation of the ego, the complete dissolution of the individual self in the overwhelming presence of the divine. Historical accounts speak of profound states of mystical ecstasy and radiant visions of the beloved God. Yet even among the revered Sufi masters, differing viewpoints existed. The illustrious poet and mystic Rumi wisely cautioned, "Why seek God in intoxication when he already dances soberly within your heart?" Cannabis was employed with careful moderation and deep reverence. When it risked becoming a crutch rather than a bridge to the divine, its use was discontinued. Cabala, the gates of light and the subtle traps of the ego. Within the mystical tradition of Cabala, no direct mentions of cannabis exist, likely due to specific cultural context or perhaps out of necessary caution. Nevertheless, a consistent wisdom resonates through its teachings. The Zohar warns that those who attempt to forcefully enter the gates of light without adequate preparation risk being consumed by their own ignorance. In contemporary terms, without a solid foundation of spiritual readiness, any seemingly sacred substance can easily become a sophisticated trap for the ego. Gnostic and Essene Christian traditions, sacred anointing oils and prophetic incense. Recent archaeological research, notably the work of Raphael Maculam and Sula Benet, suggests the potential use of cannabinoid resins and herbs within the anointing oils and temple incense of the ancient Gnostic and Essene Christian communities. Some scholars even propose that the term Kane Basam, found in the Old Testament, may indeed refer to the cannabis plant. However, its application was not recreational, but deeply ritualistic, liturgical, serving as a conduit to prophetic states of consciousness. The use of this plant without a sense of sacredness was considered a profane act. Africa and Indigenous Americas. Reverence for the spirit of the plant. Across the diverse landscapes of Africa and the Americas, indigenous shamanic traditions, from the mystical Congo to the vast Amazon rainforest, hold a profound reverence for plants possessing unique spiritual power. Cannabis, when utilized, is treated with the same profound respect accorded to ayahuasca, mapacho tobacco, or peyote. Their understanding is clear. It is not merely the physical plant that heals or reveals, but the inherent spirit residing within it. And this spirit only manifests in the presence of genuine respect and heartfelt intention. Within Afro-American syncretic religions, such as Candomblé and Umbanda, while cannabis may not be a central element, the fundamental concept of ecstasy, a vital, impersonal spiritual energy that permeates all existence, remains crucial. Each plant possesses its own unique ecstasy, a distinct vibrational frequency and purpose. To utilize a plant without understanding its specific ecstasy is akin to striking a sacred drum without knowing which spirit you are invoking. Even within the Rastafari movement, where cannabis, known as ganja, is revered as the herb of wisdom, its use is deeply embedded in liturgical practices. Ganja is employed during reasoning sessions, profound discussions, spiritual reflection gatherings, in songs, prayers, and meditative practices. This herb is considered a sacred sacrament, not a casual pastime. Neutral potential, a stairway to heaven or a bottomless abyss. The unifying thread that runs through all these diverse traditions is this: cannabis possesses immense potential, and by its very nature, potential is neutral. It can serve as a stairway leading to enlightenment or a treacherous path to delusion, a valuable tool for self-discovery or a debilitating crutch of dependence, a gateway to expanded awareness or a prison of self-deception. The determining factor is not the plant itself, but the individual using it, their level of consciousness, their underlying intention, and their degree of preparation. For as the wisdom of the Corpus Hermeticum teaches, spirit does not yield to those who approach it in a state of self-intoxication, and those who seek spiritual shortcuts may ultimately discover that they have embarked on a vicious and ultimately unproductive cycle. Ultimately, the pivotal question is not, is cannabis sacred, but rather, are you sacred enough to use it? Every plant that unlocks spiritual portals also unveils mirrors, and these mirrors, contrary to our common desires, do not always reflect beauty. At times, they expose the very aspects of ourselves we have diligently avoided confronting for lifetimes. Cannabis, like many other entheogenic substances, possesses the uncanny ability to dissolve our carefully constructed mass. But not every soul is truly ready to gaze upon their own unfiltered face, stripped bare of all illusions. And this is the precise point where the profound spiritual effects of cannabis begin, not in the initial feelings of euphoria or altered perception, but in the inevitable and often challenging confrontation with the self. Confronting the shadow. An unexpected cleansing of the soul. Carl Jung, the pioneering founder of analytical psychology, introduced the concept of the shadow to describe the totality of the repressed aspects of our being. This is not inherent evil, but rather everything that the conscious ego refuses to acknowledge. Our deepest fears, unresolved traumas, forbidden desires, and inherited ancestral pain. In his extensive writings, Jung asserted that Confronting and integrating the shadow is the indispensable first step on the journey towards psychological and spiritual wholeness. Is it merely a coincidence that many individuals, upon consuming cannabis, experience heightened anxiety, feelings of paranoia, or an intense sensation of internal exposure? The plant itself does not generate these feelings. It simply peels back the layers of our carefully crafted persona. And what emerges into conscious awareness is what has always resided within. For esoteric and occult traditions, this phenomenon comes as no surprise. In her insightful work, Psychic Self-Defense, Dion Fortune elucidates how altered states of consciousness, whether induced by ritual, psychoactive substances, or traumatic events, weaken the protective etheric fields surrounding an individual, rendering them more susceptible to external influences. She astutely warns, when consciousness falters, entities from lower regions may draw near, feeding off the emotional breaches exposed. This is not mere superstition, but rather a description of subtle psychodynamic interactions. When the conscious mind recedes, whether through the natural process of sleep, the focused discipline of meditation, or the altered state induced by cannabis, the unconscious mind rises to the forefront. And if that unconscious realm is burdened by unhealed wounds and unresolved conflicts, they will inevitably find a way to express themselves. What we commonly label a bad trip is more often than not the spirit's innate drive to cleanse and heal itself. The ancient tradition of Raja Yoga, particularly as codified in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, clearly recognizes this dynamic. Patanjali acknowledges that paranormal abilities, known as siddhis, may spontaneously arise through the use of certain herbs. However, he strongly cautions that these powers are ultimately illusory and potentially detrimental if they are not accompanied by the development of clear discernment, viveka, and a strong ethical foundation. Furthermore, he warns that siddhis can become significant obstacles on the path to samadhi, true enlightenment, as they tend to inflate the spiritual ego, a subtle and often insidious trap far more difficult to detect than the ordinary ego. As the insightful philosopher Alan Watts eloquently stated in his talks on drugs and spirituality, substances open doors that only silence should open. They are shortcuts, yes, but unstable shortcuts. And often those who walk through these doors without a map or guide come back through the same door, only now unsure of where they are. The energetic realm, a lighthouse adrift without a captain. On an energetic level, cannabis exerts a direct influence on the subtle body, the network of energy channels and centers that underlies our physical form. Many experienced practitioners of modalities such as Reiki, Kundalini Yoga, and ceremonial magic have reported a noticeable increase in the sensitivity of their auric field, energy field, following the use of cannabis. This heightened sensitivity can be beneficial if the individual is well-grounded and energetically balanced. However, when this foundation is lacking, the individual can become like a powerful lighthouse adrift without a captain, emitting a bright signal that attracts not only benevolent influences, but also potentially draining or predatory energetic entities. Certain Amazonian shamans offer a profound insight. Every plant that opens is a plant that tests, and the test is not mystical or esoteric. It is fundamentally moral. What will you do with what you see? Will you run and hide, intellectually analyze it to death, or take meaningful action toward integration and healing? Many individuals who engage in chronic cannabis use report a persistent feeling of stagnation in their lives. While the physical body may experience relaxation, the soul seems to languish. Creative impulses may surface, but they rarely translate into tangible results. There can be a deep feeling of creativity and insight, yet it often fails to produce any genuine, lasting transformation. This phenomenon is what Kabbalistic scholars refer to as kelipot, energetic shells or husks, layers formed by unintegrated perceptions and poorly digested mystical experiences that accumulate like spiritual dust within one's energetic field. These kelipot can create a deceptive illusion of growth and progress without any actual inner development. The most significant danger lies in mistaking the mere feeling of spiritual experience for genuine evolution. For not all expansion is elevation. Expansion without a clear direction and purpose is merely a form of spiritual swelling, which sooner or later is destined to burst. At this critical juncture, cannabis, when used unconsciously or abusively, transforms from a potentially sacred plant into an agent of stagnation. This shift is not inherent to the plant's nature, but arises from a disconnected and unmindful pattern of use. While cannabis itself does not generate spiritual passivity, it can provide the perfect energetic framework for those who already harbor this tendency within themselves. Some individuals might argue, but I feel a sense of peace when I use it, so it must be beneficial. However, peace that is solely generated by an external agent is akin to a sense of calm within a locked room. Pleasant, perhaps, but ultimately artificial and unsustainable. True peace arises from deep within, rooted in the very core of one's being, capable of enduring even amidst external chaos. If cannabis brings you peace, ask yourself, is it teaching you how to cultivate that peace independently? Or is it merely offering you a temporary and ultimately illusory respite? The authentic encounter with the divine almost invariably begins with a courageous encounter with one's own shadow. And this meeting is rarely comfortable or aesthetically pleasing. There are no shimmering rainbows or nostalgic sepia filters. Instead, there may be tears, feelings of shame, anger, and profound confusion. But if one can remain present, breathing, and attentively observing, something transformative begins to unfold. This is not a hallucinatory revelation, but a quiet and profound process of integration, an acceptance of what truly is. And from this acceptance, the potential for genuine growth and healing emerges. In this context, cannabis can be likened to a still and reflective pool of water. It has the capacity to mirror the vastness of the sky above. But if one dives in hastily and without awareness, they are likely to stir up only the mud at the bottom. The interconnected web, the cultural soul of cannabis. The human spirit does not journey in isolation. Our inner explorations, however solitary they may seem, are always deeply intertwined with the collective web of consciousness to which we belong. No spiritual practice, no potent plant medicine, no moment of profound enlightenment is ever purely individual. Every experience that touches us reverberates through the fabric of our culture. And conversely, everything that our culture collectively accepts or rejects subtly shapes the way we perceive and interact with ourselves. Cannabis serves as a powerful illustration of this interconnectedness. A plant with ancient mystical roots has now been transformed into a global commodity, a ubiquitous pop culture icon, a contentious topic of political debate, and a symbolic currency of youthful rebellion. Yet long before its modern-day legal battles and cultural trends, it held a significant place within the sacred traditions of many societies. And in certain communities around the world, it continues to be revered as such. Within the Rastafarian tradition, for instance, ganja is not viewed as an addictive substance, but rather as a sacred vow, a spiritual pact with the divine. Originating in the 1930s Jamaica, the Rastafari movement emerged as a form of resistance against colonialism and oppression, but also as a vibrant spiritual renaissance deeply rooted in African traditions, interpretations of the Bible, and a distinct holistic worldview. For the Rastas, the herb is considered the healing of the nations, as prophesied in the Book of Revelation. Its use is a sacrament, a deliberate act to draw closer to JRH, the name they give to the living and ever-present God. There is no casualness in this act, only profound reverence. The reasoning sessions, where ganja is smoked collectively while engaging in deep philosophical reflection and spiritual contemplation, are liturgical practices in their own right. Silence, active listening, spoken words, and the rising smoke intertwine, creating a sacred space where the collective becomes the cathedral and the plant serves as the incense of the spirit. But the reverence for cannabis extends beyond the Rastafari. Across the African continent, particularly within various Bantu traditions, historical records and ongoing practices reveal the ritualistic use of cannabis in celebrations, funeral ceremonies, and significant rites of passage. Its purpose was not to numb pain or facilitate escapism, but rather to aid in the process of moving through pain with greater presence and understanding. It was an invocation of ancestral wisdom, not a tool for alienation or detachment. In pre-Columbian America, while the cannabis plant itself was not native, the ritualistic use of other psychoactive plants in collective ceremonies was widespread and deeply integrated into their spiritual and cultural fabric. The underlying principle remained consistent. Substances that opened spiritual portals were utilized, yes, but always within a supportive framework of cosmology, myths, established rituals, the guidance of spiritual leaders, and a cohesive, symbolic collective structure. Outside of this sacred framework, the plant's power was often seen as diminished or even potentially dangerous. Modernity, in its relentless drive towards secularization and commodification, has effectively desacralized cannabis for much of the world. It has been ripped from the context of the temple and placed onto the shelves of cultural supermarkets. It has been transformed into an internet meme, a marketable product, and a trendy aesthetic. What was once a sacred sacrament has become a marketing strategy. What was once a vehicle for spiritual exploration has become a consumer brand. The psychedelic counterculture of the 1960s attempted to reclaim some of that lost ritualistic value. However, this movement often lacked deep roots, established lineages of practice, and genuine initiation. Individuals, often inspired by the writings of figures like Alan Watts and Timothy Leary, experimented with cannabis in conjunction with other powerful substances, like LSD, often within a politically charged atmosphere. While this era undoubtedly involved a genuine search for transcendence and expanded consciousness, it was often fragmented and lacked the grounding and wisdom of more ancient traditions. As Aldous Huxley himself warned in The Doors of Perception, the visionary experience may reveal, but it does not teach. It shows, but it does not structure. And the inherent danger lies in mistaking a fleeting glimpse of the transcendent for a permanent state of being. Western culture, in its widespread discrediting of traditional wisdom and ritual, has created a perilous void, a yearning for spirituality often devoid of meaningful ritual, a pursuit of experience without ethical guidance, a seeking of ecstasy without the necessary integration, and a desire for profound insight without the commitment to sustained action. Within this context, cannabis has often become a symbol of counterculture, rebellion, and personal freedom, but rarely one of profound spiritual responsibility. This fundamental difference underscores why, in traditions where cannabis is truly considered sacred, its use is almost invariably a collective endeavor. The group functions as a container, a compass, and a witness for the individual's experience. In many Afro-Amerindian rituals, for example, the use of potent plant medicines is never a solitary act. It is interwoven with communal chants, rhythmic instruments, cyclical ceremonies, and practices of energetic cleansing. There are established limits and protocols. The collective body sustains the sacredness of the experience, and the individual often undergoes a process of ego dissolution followed by spiritual rebirth within this supportive context. And here, we return to the heart of the matter. Cannabis possesses a cultural soul, carrying within it the weight of all the narratives and meanings it has accumulated throughout history. When utilized within the sacred space of a temple or ritual, it acts as a sacrament, a conduit to the divine. However, when smoked alone in the isolated darkness of anxious solitude, it tends to amplify feelings of disconnection and fragmentation. It is as adaptable as water, taking on the shape of the vessel that contains it. And the vessel of modern culture is often shallow, hurried, and cynical. The herb that once invoked the presence of gods is now the subject of lighthearted Netflix series. The hemp of knowledge has often been reduced to a marketing gimmick, a punchline in a stand-up comedy routine, or a fleeting gesture of manufactured rebellion. Yet pockets of resistance persist. Indigenous communities continue to safeguard their traditional practices, refusing the spiritual extractivism of dominant cultures. Young seekers are rediscovering the power of ritual, fasting, and sacred song. Silent masters, even amidst the cacophony of urban life, continue to teach the art of smoking and prayer. The plant itself remains unchanged. What shifts dramatically is the context of its use, the intention of the user, and the symbolic field that shapes the entire experience. And perhaps deep down, This is the most profound lesson that cannabis can offer us. True spirituality is not merely an individual sensation, but a collective frequency. It is not solely about what you feel in isolation, but about the energy you generate within a community. It is not just about the visions you may perceive under the plant's influence, but about the person you consciously become after its effects have faded away. As an ancient African proverb wisely states, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together in a circle. Bring the drum, bring the fire, bring the plant. Between light and shadow, the precarious balance of discernment. Authentic spiritual growth is not measured by the intensity of altered states you temporarily experience, but by the sustained elevation of your being in everyday life. The true path is not illuminated by fleeting visionary lights, but by how you navigate the shadows those lights inevitably cast. Between the radiant light and the obscuring fog lies a delicate and crucial boundary, and its name is discernment. Cannabis, like all powerful plant medicines, offers no guarantees or easy promises. It presents possibilities that can illuminate or obscure, inspire or numb. It is at this critical juncture that the spiritual seeker faces a profound choice. Do they seek to genuinely expand their consciousness or merely to temporarily escape from it? As Alan Watts, often mistakenly perceived as a mere hedonist, offered a profoundly subtle insight, anything can become a meditation if you are present, and anything can become a drug if you are absent. The fundamental issue is not the substance itself, but the quality of awareness that accompanies its use. And when genuine presence is absent, the spiritual path can easily devolve into a repetitive and ultimately unproductive carousel. This is precisely why ancient wisdom traditions invariably accompanied the use of sacred plants with carefully constructed rituals, periods of fasting, sacred chanting, contemplative silence, thorough preparation, and the guidance of experienced teachers. These practices were not born out of mere superstition, but out of a deep understanding of energetic hygiene and spiritual safety. They understood what modern society has largely forgotten. A spiritual portal is not a place for casual sightseeing. It is a realm of potent passage, and not every soul is adequately prepared for what awaits on the other side. Discernment, known as crisis in Greek philosophy and Viveka in Vedanta, is the invisible yet crucial blade that allows us to distinguish what is real and lasting from what is merely fleeting sensation. It is the eye of the middle, the third eye perceived not as a source of supernatural power, but as an inner compass guiding us towards truth. And in the spiritual use of cannabis, without this essential compass, what may feel like profound enlightenment could simply be heightened sensitivity. What seems like a profound vision might be nothing more than a mental echo, and what is perceived as intuitive insight could be merely the disguised whispers of our own desires. There exists a subtle form of intoxication that can deceptively feel like profound clarity. It often arrives accompanied by brilliant insights, synesthetic experiences, and seemingly meaningful synchronicities. But if these insights do not translate into tangible changes in your relationships with others, your engagement with the world, and your conscious integration of your own shadow aspects, then they remain nothing more than spiritual fireworks, beautiful to behold for a moment, but ultimately lacking any lasting direction or impact. The authentic spiritual path is often more arid and demanding. It requires consistent effort, a commitment to presence without the need for external spectacle, and a cultivation of inner silence that transcends the noise of the mind. And this is why cannabis, when used outside of a structured spiritual path, can foster an addiction far more subtle and insidious than mere chemical dependence. The addiction to the feeling of spirituality without the dedicated practice of spirituality. Under the influence of cannabis, it is often easy to appear deep and insightful, both to oneself and to others. However, the true test of spiritual depth lies in our ability to maintain that grounded presence and wisdom in the face of everyday challenges, while stuck in traffic, waiting in line at the bank, or navigating a difficult conflict with someone who has hurt us. True enlightenment is not measured by the visions you see when your eyes are closed, but by the compassionate and conscious actions you take when your eyes are open and your feet are firmly planted on the ground. And when genuine discernment is absent, What cannabis often creates is a fogged mirror, where the ego mistakenly perceives itself as awakened, while in reality it has merely taken a temporary nap in the comfortable lap of sensory experience, a kind of vegetative peace that ultimately paralyzes more than it truly pacifies. In traditional occult philosophy, there exists a principle known as the false light of Hod, a deceptive sensation of mental clarity that is actually nothing more than the mind intoxicated by unintegrated and often grandiose imagery. Its brilliance is purely superficial, lacking any deep roots in genuine understanding. Cannabis, when used without wisdom and discernment, can precisely feed this illusion. The alluring but ultimately misleading feeling of profound progress, while one is actually moving in increasingly colorful but ultimately unproductive circles. Therefore, the spiritual use of cannabis should ideally be reserved for times when the inner landscape is relatively clear, when there is a well-defined intention, when genuine silence is cultivated both before and, even more importantly, after its use, when guidance from experienced individuals is available, when practiced within a recognized tradition and method, with a spirit of humility, and above all, when one is truly prepared to receive the often uncomfortable answers that it may reveal. Because as the wise Sufi master Hafiz once eloquently stated, God is like a mirror that does not laugh at your grimaces. It simply reflects them clearly. Is cannabis a plant with spiritual potential? Undeniably, yes. But all potential requires the right context, diligent discipline, clear intention, and a deep understanding of its nature and effects. When stripped of its sacred, ritualistic function and reduced to a mere cultural commodity, it runs the significant risk of becoming just another fleeting form of distraction in an already overly distracted world. True spiritual seeking is a subtle and demanding art. It is not about escaping reality, but about learning to fully inhabit it with awareness and compassion. It is not about chasing after fleeting visions of light, but about cultivating the inner light that shines steadily within. So what are you truly seeking when you light that joint? Is it genuine peace, a sense of spaciousness, or profound inner silence? If you cannot cultivate these qualities within the depths of your own being, perhaps the plant is merely lending you a temporary mirror, and mirrors, as we know, can only reflect what is already there. If this video has resonated with you and stirred something within, please consider sharing it with someone else who is also seeking more than just fleeting sensations, someone who is yearning for clarity, truth, and genuine spiritual depth.